I'm Tristan,
I am Madison.
and we're back with Masters of the Air Debrief for episode 4.
This was a good episode. It was a little bit more emotional than the last episode. Last episode was really intense. And I feel like this episode allowed us to catch our breath a little bit, but also kind of get to some of the emotional experiences that these characters are having.
We start off picking back up with Sergeant Willie Quinn on the ground in Belgium with the freedom fighters, getting full-on interrogated. Well, before that, he's in a little Belgian cafe and meets up with Sergeant Charles Bailey Brooks, lovable Southerner guy, and a third guy named Bob from the 306th. Just a note for spies, don't go with Bob as your name. Very bad spy name.
Yeah, I thought the interrogation scenes where they're asking them questions, initially I was like, what are they trying to do here? This is really confusing. And then it wasn't until they were like, oh, this guy was a spy after they shot him. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. They're trying to like suss out how American these people are.
I also love the slight critique on Americans, that Americans are kind of bad at singing the Star Spangled Banner and don't exactly know much about their country. I was like, some European wrote this part. I get
it. Guilty as charged. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When I was in London, someone was like, can you say the Pledge of Allegiance? And I was like, maybe.
I think I can. I mean, I did it every day.
Banner?
Yeah.
I'm like, Star Spangled Banner's played at sports games, but I don't sing with it. Not that I'm un-American. It's just like, oh yeah, ba 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 da ba ba ba. So I felt a lot like the two real Americans. I was like humming along, missing 5 words, and it was great to see that the spy was the one who sang it completely correct. And they're like, nah. Americans don't know. No American boys singing this to a T.
That is too funny. That's really funny. That's clever writing.
It was intense because, Bailey, the other guy, keeps asking Willie Quinn. He's like, what happened to Babyface? Everyone's asking, what happened to Babyface? Uh-huh. I did think it was weird that he's saying everybody's asking. And I'm like, who's everybody? You're here with one other guy.
Yeah.
Who else is asking about it? Whatever.
Yeah.
But just to be Quinn and have to finally say, I couldn't get him out of the ball turret. And I watched him explode above me. I just wonder how many guys lied, first off, and just could not say it. And how many people reacted like Bailey did in this episode where he's like, hey, I know, you had to get out of there, man. You tried your best.
Yeah. Who's that actor? What was his name?
Kai Alexander, who plays Willie Quinn.
Yeah. Really good. Like he's he looks like a teenager. He looks like he's 19 years old. But definitely does a good job at being, playing this vulnerable character who's also really determined to try and make it through.
Yeah, he's great. And once they get briefed, the spy has been shot. We see later in the episode they're getting on a train going through German occupied territory, and the absolute panic attack he has when he thinks he might be caught. Just seeing swastikas everywhere. It's funny how it's just so ingrained in our brains that it is evil, that every time I see one, I'm like, did my heart rate just raise? Like, it's still as scary to see a swastika, and I wasn't around for any of that.
Well, I mean, did you ever watch The Man in the High Castle?
Loved it. Yep.
Such a good show, but like the reason that they stopped making the show was they were like, oh, this is too close to home. Like Nazis are a thing again now. Like we got to stop.
Too close to home in America.
Yeah, we got to stop making content about Nazis in any way. So yeah, I couldn't imagine like, when you see the enemy flag draped over the train stations and stuff, like you realize, oh, these characters are deep behind enemy lines, and this is not going to be just some like Hobbit like journey through farm fields to get us back. Like this is going to be a really dangerous trek that they're going to have to make.
Yeah, and he goes running, and then of course there's the language barrier. As Americans, we don't learn anything else for the most part, and so even just passing French or German or Spanish, it wouldn't matter where you went down. If you're some kid from Iowa or Seattle or Long Island, you hardly know your own version of English, and you're making up your own words. You're not going to know what's happening when the train conductor's asking for your ticket. So it definitely was a stressful scene to watch of him on that train. and the girl has to go to the bathroom. Your escort just had to take a leak and you could be shot.
Your bladder is going to cost someone's life. So the episode picks up with the boys in Africa. They're on the north coast of Africa, right? And they're waiting there to get picked up by their own people. And I gotta say, Austin Butler's there with his shirt off, and I was expecting him to be absolutely jacked, but he just has this normal body. And I was so excited to just see this Hollywood heartthrob have just a normal ass body. And I'm like, all right, there's one for the little guys. One's for just like everyone. He's just like me for reals.
Being tuned into football, there's always shirtless pictures of every QB right before the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Patrick Mahomes and Brock Purdy, just Austin Butler looking just normal guys. We got no APAC. They're just normal guys. So yes, that was refreshing to see.
Very endearing too. Like I gotta say, the more I'm watching the show, the more I'm liking Austin Butler. I hate to say it.
Oh, this guy is gonna go far. Like he's just too good.
Yeah.
And too lovable.
Yeah, he is. And at some point he'll probably get some either a Marvel or DC role and then get jacked. So then it's all over for all of us.
Well, and he's in Dune 2, so we're gonna see how that goes. But yeah.
Yeah, he looks a little goofy in the trailers from what I've seen, but I know that he's like an alien or whatever, so it's fine.
Yeah. So they make it out of Africa.
So they make it out of Africa, and then they're back in their base in the UK, and then they're about to go on another mission. And I think this is the one where Bucky takes his weekend off because he's run a lot of missions and had a lot of harrowing experiences, and so he takes his essentially PTO, and he's like, "Hey Buck, do you want to like take this with me?" And Buck doesn't go with him, which still our dynamic duo has been split up.
And you forever wonder what would have happened if he just would have taken a weekend off.
I know.
Well, Bucky takes his weekend. He goes dancing. He meets this woman, Joanna Kulig, I believe. She is Polish. She is in an amazing movie from 2018 called Cold War. Hour and a half long. It was nominated for 3 Oscars. Best international film, and regardless. She is just a fantastic actress. Their chemistry and the story between them two, I think, was just such a good depiction of what happened to so many American servicemen. Meeting people from other countries they had never come in contact with. Language barriers, cultural barriers, no mores, no nothing. And they're just like, wow, pretty woman looks nothing like the girls back in Iowa or New York or Minnesota or Wisconsin. Let's go dancing. Sure, let's go dancing. And it's kind of fun to watch that play out with the smooth Bucky.
It is. Although every time I watch a period piece and there's sex in it, I'm like, what kind of contraceptives do they have back then? Like, did they have condoms? Like, when did that become a thing? Because like, I know that a lot of these, these encounters left a lot of fatherless babies in Europe. But like, was everyone just like freeballing it all the time? Like, talk about dangerous, right?
You're catching flack or you're catching clap. I think I'm going to pull it up. Okay, so 1930s, the Great Depression. Companies are eager to sell women contraceptives, but it was not permitted by law. What? Okay, anyway, that's wild.
I mean, America, the patriarchy, that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess America was living in the 1800s and the 1940s. The diaphragm came out in 1940s. Okay.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, let's just imagine that there were, some rudimentary contraceptives that they had.
They do mention rubbers. Okay, so I'm going to rail that back. PBS was not giving me the info. One of the boys mentions in a later episode, he's like, I didn't die. Please tell me you did not send my personal effects back home. And they're like, oh, no, it's in the mailroom. He's like, good, because I got a box full of rubbers and I don't need my mom seeing those.
Okay.
So there is a callback. We know they have something.
Good. Okay, then I will breathe a sigh of relief every time I see a scene in here.
But then read that book I talked about, in which it explains that nobody used contraceptives, and there's a bunch of quarter American children all over Europe. But regardless, But that's a light take. But this scene between Bucky and this lady, I thought it was pretty good emotional core for the episode. Like I said, the last episode was so intense
that this one allowed us to kind of catch our breath and kind of settle into who the characters are. For this one, you can really see that like Bucky he's kind of wrestling with his part in the war so far. He's talking about how he's never been on the business end of bombings, because the scene takes place during the night, and they're looking out the window, and there's just flak all over the sky, and just explosions going on, presumably in the neighborhood of where they are. And Bucky's just like, I've never been on the business end of my own business before. And you can kind of see that he's wrestling with the very non-personal nature of his own killing. Because, you watch Band of Brothers, and like, it's a very personal sort of warfare when you can see your enemy. But these pilots, they're just dropping bombs on factories, and they presumably are killing people, but they have no idea who they are. And I think the kind of the somberness of Bucky during the scene, I thought was really moving, as well as there was still risk involved with them being there, because bombs were actively falling around them. And even the next day, there is a building that has just been absolutely demolished. That there is quite a bit of chaos around the next day, and it just shows that like, oh, well, this is just the house that they were in just didn't get bombed. Yeah. But I thought it was a really fantastic emotional core to the episode.
And without spoiling too much, I think the next 2 to 3 episodes and how Bucky goes from dropping to being on the other end of the bomb or whatever else is really intense. There's some really intense scenes that kind of pay this foreshadowing or this first emotional moment with that whole concept off. I knew a guy who was probably in his under 10 during World War II in London. So during the Battle of Britain and the bombings there. And he just talked about like the air raid sirens, everyone went underground, everyone hunkered down. The next morning, when you would just go to work or whatever else, you would just pass destroyed buildings. That was my friend's house. That's the bakery. Just the reality of keep calm and carry on was so real for the people on the ground. And to your point, the ones dropping the bombs are hopefully landing on an airstrip, whatever side they're on, seeing their friends die, but they don't see what it actually looks like. And it only brought to my mind, in 20 to 30 years, we're going to have some really intense movies or series about drone pilots in Nevada.
Oh my gosh.
Piloting these drones the last 20 years.
Yeah,
I'm sure. It has to be worse. Has to be.
Yeah, I mean, not that there's a good way to kill someone, but I feel like the more like you can see that it's a human being that you're doing damage to, I think that certainly can, I don't know, maybe close the loop or something. But I feel like the burnout and the trauma of facelessly killing mass amounts of people with a high degree of uncertainty around it.
Yeah.
That the trauma of that has got to be just insane.
We'll see what they decide to cover before the season's ending.
This is also the episode where you can kind of start telling that there's some tension between the pilots and command, as command is essentially like running these guys dry on like doing missions every day and hardly letting them take any R&R. And I feel like there was a scene between Bucky and the commanding officer in a bar because they were having some kind of a party that was one where you're like, are they about to each other or are they about to hug? And like everyone around them was full of tension. And it was like, well, we don't actually know what's about to happen here. And you could kind of tell that there's some growing unrest amongst the pilots about what they're being asked to do.
The tension definitely grows, and these young boys who are flying planes when maybe they shouldn't be, now they have enough experience under their belt to question these people who are giving them the orders. So all the more intense when Bucky gets a call and calls back on his PTO on his vacation to find out what's happened with the most recent bombing run.
Which is that a lot of people got shot out of the air, including his friend Buck. And Buck is MIA, which is, presumed dead. And then Bucky just heads home.
How do you feel about Buck presumably dying off screen and not even showing us that battle?
I think there's pros and cons to it. I think, obviously, the storytelling, reason would be, if you're doing something off screen, it's because you want some mystery around it. so that as an audience you don't know exactly what's happening, so that there's something kind of captivating for your audience. But at the same time, like, I think, as another positive would be that this was the experience of people on the ground. They didn't get to have cut to scenes of their friends up there being shot down or bailing out of a plane. They were just on the ground, and then they heard the news. And so I think this episode was following Bucky pretty closely. And, he's kind of our main POV character. And that was his POV, was that he heard on the phone about these things. And so, I think there is a version of this where, we got Bucky's story, but we also kind of got the overstory, and we got scenes about the other stuff, but probably just didn't land as emotionally hard as they wanted it to land, because this is not the story that they're telling. Although, there's certainly an argument to be said that's like, well, we care about these other characters and we want their adventures to be seen on the screen, and we want to be, we want to watch what happens to them. So, I can see the pros and cons to either.
Yeah, I felt cheated at first. I was like, oh, come on. Is this for budget reasons? Like, what are we not seeing this for? But then as he has more of this conversation on the phone with the CO, it becomes clear that we, the audience, are with Bucky on his journey, on his adventure. And it would cut a little bit of the emotional moment of, hey, just calling back to see how the mission went, and him before he hangs up the phone saying he's coming back to get in the game. It's definitely an emotional moment, but also one of things are the worst they've been, and it's probably going to get worse because he's just lost his friend. He's going back in an anger and a fury. It's probably not going to get any better than this.
You feel for these characters, and we're only 4 episodes deep, and it's like, how much more hell are they going to get put through before it's done? And like, at this rate, how many more planes are they going to even have? Like, they just keep getting shot out of the air. Like, I'm sure they don't get made as fast as they're getting shot out of the air. And so, you just can kind of tell that they're going to get worn pretty thin.
Yeah, replacement planes and replacement pilots just seem to be in very short supply, especially at the beginning of the war.
Yeah, so far, 4 episodes deep, really enjoying this show.
Yeah.
I think now 4 episodes in, we've had a really good balance of kind of aerial warfare as well as some really character-driven stories. And now I feel like we're kind of narrowing in on Bucky as kind of our POV character, at least for a time. And we've got a good balance between emotional storytelling and like really action-oriented some beats. I'm digging it.
These are going to be the ones that when people watch it week to week, they're going to be like, where were the bombs? Where was the action? But on a closer look, or if someone's just being a little less hungry for the bombing sequences, you see the real stories behind these people who are real people. And we have the books and the journals, the letters to kind of back this up, which teases what we're going to have on some episodes later in the season. We've got some cool guests. We'll have some cool stories from people closer connected than we to the real stories here and the real people behind Masters of the Air.
Very, very cool. Very looking forward to that.
And until then, watch and rewatch this episode, and we'll catch you next week.